What's in the box?
Hello and welcome to What's in the Box, Episode 7, The Curious Case of Benjamin Button. Wouldn't it have been good if Episode 7 had been 7? Maybe it is in some alternate reality, some Marvel multiverse. No, anyway, back to today. I am Benjamin's Button, and opposite me is the curious case of the disappearing Daniel. Unfortunately, can't be with us today due to work commitments and things that occur in real life. He will be sadly missed, but he'll be back next week. So, Curious Case of Benjamin Button, 2008, Fincher's film, based on the short story by F. Scott Fitzgerald, starring Brad Pitt, Cate Blanchett, with an ensemble of players underneath, like Tilda Swinton, for example, Tara P. Henson, who come in and out of the story. Set in New Orleans. The present day element shows Cate Blanchett having her on her deathbed, having her daughter read Benjamin Button's diary to her just as Hurricane Katrina is about to land in that area. So there is an element of flashback involved. There's an overarching narrative to the film. Now, whether you like films with narration is another thing. I think it works quite well in this film because it then stops you having to have too many scenes of exposition. It's much easier for a voiceover to say, "I'd never seen New York before," instead of having a scene where somebody lands and goes, "Oh, gee, look, it's my first time in New York. Oh, look." We've seen that in too many films. Very personal to Fincher, this one, because his dad died during the making of it. And I think that it's very evident that whilst the short story, it's very true to the short story, but Fincher has added so many more layers about life and death to this. It's hard not to when there is so much death in this film. And it's not to say it's a slasher pick or anything like that, but there is a lot of death. The film opens with Benjamin Button's mum dying in childbirth. Button is raised in an elderly care home where death seems to be like a daily occurrence. They seem to cycle through residents at some ungodly rate. It's kind of like, whoa, are you actually killing them off? They're not, but, are you actually killing them off? So you've got a lot of death that surrounds him. But the beauty of him being raised in this elderly care home is that mentally, he may physically be a toddler, but mentally he is an old person. So it's quite a clever trick, and it's a nice place for him to be growing up, because physically he actually still resembles an old person. It's a clever trick, and it's well done. I wasn't sure about watching this film again. I think the last time I'd seen it, I felt it was a little bit too reaching for the Hollywood trope. This is, well, I always consider this to be Fincher's Forrest Gump. You've got the two characters reaching over a fairly long period of time across American history, and these are all shown within Benjamin Button. There's no him meeting Nixon or anything like that, but you do get that understanding of very clearly where he is in periods of time. But I think this time round, I enjoyed it more, and I don't know whether that's age or the fact that family units change, that babies are born and people move on, pass away, die, whatever you want to call it. That changes particularly how you perceive this film. It's too long. I think Fincher's never been shy of having a film run with legs. You look at Zodiac. Zodiac is too long. The same can be said here of Benjamin Button. It's just too long. We could quite easily take out 30 minutes. It's 2 hours 46. You could quite easily take out 30 minutes and not massively impact the film. There's a lovely little side story in there about when he meets Tilda Swinton. But ultimately, what does that do for him as a character and us as an audience? So we could have removed that quite easily. I'm not 100% sold on Kate Blanchett in this film, on her performance, and it's a difficult one because you don't get to see any other actress or actor carry that part, so it's difficult. I just don't think she's 100% comfortable in the role. At times, I don't know. Maybe it's something to do with the amount of digital effects that they used on the faces. These are the very, very early days of de-aging technology. So there's a lot of it's Kate Blanchett at, forgive me, Kate, I don't know your age, but let's say 40, playing somebody who's supposed to be 17. So there's a lot of line removal and nips and tucks and all that. It's all very nice. And I wonder whether that impacted on the ability to form facial expressions which require lines and frowns. I don't know, but I wasn't overly sold. Brad Pitt is Brad Pitt. We've talked about this before, that Tyler Durden it's an exception to the rule for Brad Pitt. That's a role that he was just told to go and just do what you want, go and eat all the scenery, go and do all of the things you ever wanted to do. I'm not convinced that he's got, well, one, I'm not convinced he needs a lot of range for Benjamin Button, because a lot of the time he is under deep prosthetics or digital trickery. It comes into it being Brad Pitt as he gets physically younger. So let's say somewhere around about, I think he was supposed to be 49, something like that, when there's a dance studio involved in the storyline. And he looks like Brad Pitt, and he's gorgeous, and he's beautiful, and he's just, he's too impossibly beautiful and gorgeous and all those things. As he gets younger physically, past that point, it's not convincing at all. There's the story can only end one way, but Brad Pitt's face on the frame of somebody who is getting younger and younger and younger doesn't work for me at all. It's funny because when you look at it the other way around, where he has the smaller, frail body of an old person, but he's wearing a lot of prosthetics to make him look old, it works. But it doesn't work when he's trying to look younger and younger and younger, because they're not adding prosthetics at that point. They've actually mapped his face onto a different actor's face. And for me, it doesn't work. The locations that the film chooses are epic. New Orleans at that time, in the modern day stuff, New Orleans around the time of Hurricane Katrina. But yeah, it just looks fantastic as a film. Even the scenes where he goes to sea, and he's working on a tugboat, which then eventually becomes involved in the Second World War and has a run-in with a U-boat. Those scenes look absolutely breathtaking. They are just beautifully shot. Heavily digital again, but as we said, after Panic Room, Panic Room is the end of the analog Fincher, and we moved into the digital Fincher. And this film is, whoa, this is digital Fincher with a capital D and a capital F. What else do I think about this film? The critics really seem to enjoy it, and I think a lot of people did, maybe on the first viewing. The the box office for it, it had $150 million budget, which for Fincher was massive. Um, and its gross was 335 worldwide. Now, to you and I, we say, if I put £150 down and you give me £335 back, that's a win. That's not quite how Hollywood accountants work. So you wonder just how commercially successful it was. But yeah, it's a film that sits in Fincher's catalogue comfortably now for me. It didn't before. It kind of like sat out like a sore thumb. Um, and I used to think of it as almost not a David Fincher film, which seems like a silly thing to say. He's devoted a year of his life to making this film. I suppose if Daniel was here, Daniel might take exception to how gentle this film is at times. The tagline, "Life isn't measured in minutes, but in moments." It's a bit twee, isn't it? It's a bit Hallmark. I think that's maybe one of the things that irritated me at the time. One of the things you don't get in Benjamin Button that we've seen in previous Fincher films, there's no great Fincher shot. If we think about Fight Club, we had the kitchen. You're going through the kitchen looking for that spark which ignites the apartment. The out of the medulla oblongata, down the synapse to the gun of the narrator. Panic room, tracking through the house, up and down, through objects to the back door. We don't get one of those shots in this film. That's interesting. It's almost as if Fincher had gone, there's enough digital trickery just putting the characters on the screen without putting more around it. So there is no moment there where you go, it's a Fincher shot. There's no shots where you go, oh, that's his Hitchcock shot. We had that in Panic Room when they looked up the grand stairwell, and we got the Hitchcock shot. The music in the film's fairly subdued. It's a standard. Well, it is a standard film. Let's put it that way. It's not a sci-fi or a Fight Club. So the music is fairly standard. The music for the film is done by a gentleman called Alexandre Desplat, who does a fine job here. There's nothing exceptional and there's nothing objectional. He did one of my favourite films, which is Argo, the Ben Affleck film. He was a lot more subtle in that film. The only thing that bothers me about his work is that he does a lot, and I mean a lot. You look at some of the greatest composers, the John Williams, the James Horners, the people like that. They don't do 3 or 4 films a year, and this guy does 3 or 4 films a year. And if you sit back and listen to his work, you can start to see his motifs and his styles and his techniques shining through a little bit too much. So how would Fincher approach Benjamin Button today? I think that's an interesting thing. The technology, the de-aging technology, has come on quite some way. We can reference The Irishman as a fairly recent example of using lots of de-aging technology, which some would argue too much in some scenes and not terribly convincing. But I just wonder whether, if Finch had the opportunity to go back to this film, would he cast the same people in the roles, and would he shoot it in the same way? Now, I'm pretty sure that he wouldn't change the way he shot it. And I think, harping back to my concerns around Cate Blanchett, I think he might recast Cate Blanchett. And I would have said that if this film had been made another 6 years later, I think he would have gone with Rooney Mara. Don't know how controversial that is, but I know that he's a real fan of Rooney Mara's work, particularly in Social Network, and obviously then he cast her in The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo. I just wonder whether Cate Blanchett wasn't cast. She's a fine actress. Don't get me wrong. I'm not having a dig at her. Whether she wasn't cast because she's a marquee name. You've got Brad Pitt and then you need somebody else, because this is definitely a we want awards film. So I think this would have been a more believable to me if you can. How can you have a film about somebody aging backwards and say believable? Um, but it'd definitely be easy for my brain to comprehend with a different actress. And then at that point, you're making it a little bit later. Brad Pitt's a bit older, so who would you put in the Brad Pitt role there? You wouldn't change it. Fincher wouldn't change it. They're buddies. Brad Pitt's gorgeous. It he does everything that's on the. He says he needs to do on the tin. Um, Overall, then I enjoyed it this time round, but not last time round. Last time round, I thought it was too pat, too Hollywood, too Academy Awards. This time around, I really enjoyed it. Is it a typical Fincher film? Nope. There is no threat, intrigue, twist. All of those standard Fincher tropes that people typically go to a Fincher film to see. People don't go to Fincher films for a date night. A couple of weeks we'll talk about Gone Girl, which is possibly the greatest anti-date night film ever. And that is Fincher putting his stamp all over it with twists and intrigue and great dialogue. That's maybe one of the things that's missing here is great dialogue. Is that the script and the story, as good as it is, the dialogue's a bit flat. There's a wonderful character played by Jared Harris called Captain Mike, who is the tugboat captain, and he calls himself an artist as he removes his shirt and displays all his art. I am a tattoo artist. But his dialogue is the best in the film because he regales Benjamin Button with tales of daring do and of the sea and of other worlds and lands and a different lifestyle, come away, have an adventure. That we needed more in of it. We needed more characters that enticed. That everybody seems to be a little bit reverential. The dialogue is reverential to either to Button or to the subject matter. So even when his birth father, who rejected him as a child, comes into it, it's all very by the numbers. There's no, oh God, boy, I missed you. This is it's. I don't know. I would never make an actor, as you can tell. So yeah, a couple of minor gripes aside, but it's definitely a Fincher film. It's just not your typical Fincher film. That gets corrected in the next film, which becomes more of a Fincher film. It's a pity Dan's not here today because Dan would have made this episode a heck of a lot longer than I have. Believe me, talking about a film on your own for this amount of time isn't easy, and I'm sure it's not been easy on your ears. So thank you very, very much for watching. Thank you very, very much for listening. We will be back, ideally as a twosome, for the social network in next episode. Thanks a lot. Take care. Bye.